I want you guys to know that I know life is hard and sometimes lonely. Anybody agree with that statement? Well, if anyone knows that, it's God. The Lord knows that above all things, that He knows our situation. People have been trying to figure out all the answers to the God questions and the doubts and the reasons why this happened and why that happened and why Jesus came as He did and why Jesus came when He did, the timing behind it. And as a man and in His situations, as we talk about at Christmas, His humble circumstances to a virgin and a man who was being scrutinized because he's married to a virgin who's going to be married to a virgin who's having a baby. So you can imagine those circumstances of loneliness. You can imagine that situation and that stigma that goes along with that. You drive around in this town too long on one of those little donut spare tires and people will start talking about you bad. You know what I mean? When's that guy going to fix his tire, right? It doesn't take much to set our culture off and put you under the bus per se. But can you imagine those situations and that circumstance? Unbelievable. Him living his life as God, but never really being understood as God. I mean, all of us at some point, whether it be with a family member, a parent, a spouse, we experience not being understood. We feel like we're communicating, we're telling what's going on in our life, and people just don't get it, right? And the next thing you know, you're receiving a lecture or you're receiving direction or someone's trying to tell you how to do everything, and you're like, they just don't get it. They just don't understand. If someone would just get it, I would feel better. I would be able to share with them what's going on. They'd be able to help me, and it would be better. One of the main points of Jesus coming as a man was so that He could understand our circumstances. That is literally the truth. And not in the sense of so that He could take a journal and share it with us later, but to the point where we could understand and believe and know that He understands. The Bible says that in all ways that we are tempted, He was tempted. Now, He was never tempted to run a stop sign because He didn't drive a car, but He was tempted in those ramifications in every area that we are. Yet He did it perfectly, okay? So what that means is, we can't do it like Jesus, we're in trouble. No, it means that He did it for us, so we don't have to try. Now, I'm not saying go out and run stop signs. Pastor said we don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. Jesus took care of that. So I'm just going to blow through town like a crazed maniac. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you can't live a perfect life. Jesus did that. But back to the part about understanding, Him knowing our dire circumstances, the loneliness that we can feel, right? Robin Williams' suicide was a real wake-up call for me, because you look at Robin Williams and you think about this guy and you think about his fans, you think about all the people that love him, his hilarious movies. Everywhere he went, he made people laugh. He made people forget about their problems, right? That was Robin Williams' MO. But the sad part was, Robin Williams did that because he did not want anyone else to feel what he was feeling. He didn't commit suicide because he got a letter in the mail that said, hey, you're out of money. He committed suicide because he could not take the depression that he faced on a daily basis of believing he couldn't figure out where value came from, where his worth came from, and he felt like a failure in that situation. And the only way out for him was to take his own life. And no one would have said, that Robin Williams guy, he'll be the first to go. Everybody's like, this guy's so happy, he's so full of joy. You do not know the people in your life and what they're struggling with. We try to figure out how to make people understand us, and the whole time we're trying to get people to understand us, we have no idea there are hundreds of people around us that we're not understanding. We're so focused on ourselves, we can't see all the people that are hurting, and sometimes the one they're putting up the biggest show are the ones that are struggling the most. It's just a fact. Jesus knows this. Not only does He know it, but He has a solution for it. And when I tell you this solution, please let it go all the way through. Don't just take out bits and pieces and say, oh, yeah, that's okay, that's not. I want you to take the whole thing, the whole picture, and see what God has actually done for us practically. And another word that sounds cool like practically, whatever you want to put in there. So what I want to share with you today is the two things that God has done for us in the church things that we can practice. We have the Lord's Supper, and we have baptism. You think, okay, wait, we're talking about Robin Williams, suicide, loneliness, God understanding us in our circumstances. Now let's have the Lord's Supper. I can't find the connection. Well, I'm getting ready to share that with you. Now, something that in my 17 or 18 years of ministry that I've learned is church is hard if you let other people and circumstances dictate what the church is supposed to be. Now, the idea of the church today is it's supposed to be a competitive, entertaining environment because the goal is to get more people in your church on Sunday morning, in your building on Sunday morning, than the people down the street. And if you have more people than they do, then obviously you're doing something right. Well, we both know that's nowhere in Scripture. It's not found anywhere. Now, that doesn't mean if there's just 2 or 3 of us, right, and we can't afford to keep the lights on, that we're like, hey, this is awesome. No, there should be some growth. There should be some change. There should be some effectiveness in people's lives, okay? If we're not affecting anybody's life, then we're probably not alive, okay? We're probably dead. But the goal is not to create the cool environment that everyone loves and likes so they'll keep coming back, because when you do that, week after week after week, you got to get more creative and more exciting and do this and do that to keep their excitement up. It's not about the excitement that we can create. It's about something totally different from that. So I want you to please listen to this and understand that there is nothing more beneficial or effective for the human being as an individual, as a couple, as a family, than what God has given us as a church. Nothing. There's nothing else out there. There's nothing out there. We all know money doesn't fix our problems. It sure does help. Don't get me wrong. If I went home today and my great uncle that doesn't exist, who discovered Atlantis, something really cool like that, and he's now a billionaire, sends me a couple grand or a couple million, it's not like I'm going to say, you know what, that's not going to solve any of my life's problems. Oh yeah, it will. Not all of them. It won't make my heart happy, but it will make some of my creditors happy, if you know where I'm getting at, right? I would like to pay my house off. That would be nice. That would be huge. But it won't fix my problems, and we know that. Relationships help, but they don't fix our problems. Why? Because the people we start a relationship with have problems of their own. So in a lot of ways, when we start a relationship to cure the loneliness, it actually adds to the responsibility, does it not? Because if we go into a relationship thinking, this person's going to fulfill my needs and they're going to make me happy, it won't be long until we're disappointed because this person has needs as well. So there's nothing out there that we can create, that we can find on this side of heaven that fixes us, that fixes our concerns and fixes our problems. But we're going to give God a chance to do this. You see, God's idea is the New Testament church, His picture of the gospel lived out. And I want us to try to understand this today. For us to live our lives throughout the week, this is the goal. For us to live our lives throughout the week, not together. The church is not a group of people that are supposed to be together all the time. It's not. The church is supposed to be a group of people that are together, a family that is together, but then still have our own nooks and crannies that we go to. Our jobs, our grocery shopping, our sports activities, whatever it is we do. Those are things we shouldn't all get a shuttle bus and go together. That is not the church. I grew up in an area in the country farther down south where there were a lot more fundamentalist Christian ideas. And there were certain groups of churches that did everything together. They met 3 or 4 times a week for a full-blown worship extravaganza. Because in their mind, they felt like if they weren't together, they weren't really the church. And I couldn't think of anything further from the truth. We are just as much the church together as we are apart. There's also a temptation with the church for us to do everything to help the world, right? The church start a food pantry. I think it's awesome that churches start food pantry. I think it's great. But for us, we don't have the capacity, the people, the finances to start a food pantry to help people that are homeless or struggling, as much as I love that. But we have Susan who goes and serves in that capacity at a place other than here. I think that's perfect for us. People that volunteer coaching Little League, right? Brian did that for years. Coached Little League down here in Sycamore forever, for a very long time. Brian's not old, but it was a long time. Just want to throw that in there. Forever. And they're like, dude, that's why he has white hair. He worked with young boys with bats for several years. And I'm sure he has plenty of stories to tell you. But that's the church, being a part of the community, not us having a Christian baseball league, right? And get all of our kids to come to our Christian baseball league, because if you come there won't be anything bad to happen, like a coach to swear or smoke on the sideline. My dad used to smoke while he coached me. I remember him coming out. He would come out to me being on the pitcher's mound. You know, I'd walk somebody or I'd get in a little trouble and he'd get upset. He'd call timeout. He'd come out there walking and talking to me with one flipping right here in his mouth, you know. That was a different day and time, you know. These days, helicopter moms would shoot him with a dart gun before he got through the fence. You know what I mean? Different days. But the picture of the church that we have is together, and when we're together, God has given us things that work, that really, really work. And it's simple. Church can be complicated. I know people that get burned out with church, and it's not burned out with God. It's burned out with busy schedules. Maybe that's the reason that God allowed me and my wife to have a big family, so that we would understand you can't pressure people. You can't just come in and lay these expectations on people as you need to spend 10 hours a week serving the Lord, and you need to be out evangelizing and knocking on doors and doing this and doing that. We get that. We get that families are busy. And we've realized that it's our job to help families, to encourage families, to give them tools and resources that fit in their lives, and not just trying to get them to do things to serve this. Simple's a big word. It's a popular word. But as Christians, as people in general, we have a tendency to be religious. And this is what religious means. This is what I'm talking about. We have this belief system that within us that if we do things, we get things. And if we serve, there's going to be a reward for that. Now, I'm not going to get into a serve and reward conversation today, because the Bible does talk about rewards. But the Bible also talks about having a life that's satisfactory before all of that. If I spend my whole life working to get rewards, I have just created more self-centeredness in my heart. It's just a Christian self-centeredness, right? If I'm out loving my neighbor because, I don't know, I'm going to get a golden skateboard one day, what are these awards? I don't know. I mean, I can't think of walking into the presence of God and being like, oh my gosh, where's my stuff, right? I just can't see that happening, right? I just can't see that picture. But I see the picture in the Bible of the prodigal son. The prodigal son returns from squandering all the wealth of his father, right? He squanders all the wealth of his father, and he walks in, and the father's been looking for him down the road, and he sees him from a ways off, and he rushes to him, and he wraps his arms around his neck, and he kisses his face, and he yells to his people. He says, "This is my son. He has returned home." He says, put new clothes on him, clean him up, put a ring on his finger, right? He received rewards, but it wasn't because the son was out serving God with all of his heart. It's because the father loved him. That's the rewards that we have, and we have so many of those right now. There's nothing greater than that. And within a half hour of the son showing up, they are having a full-blown dance party at the house. And that's why when the other brother shows up, he's mad, because he's like, I've been serving you my whole life and I never got a dance party. This moron goes and squanders all your riches, disobeys you. He shows up and he gets blessed, and the father's like, yeah, he's my son. You're my son. This was yours the whole time. What do you mean you've served me this whole time? You didn't have to do this to receive my love. I give my love. I care for you. My stuff is your stuff. You're everything to me. So there's no need to busy ourselves with serving God to get Him to bless us or answer our prayers. You see, that's an effect of knowing what we have. That's a result of us realizing what we have in the Lord. It's not something I have to do to get the Lord. It's something I already have. And then that joy and that gratefulness that comes out of what I have with God is this natural, Spirit-led desire to love people. At the food pantry, at the Little League, down the street, at my job, in all those circumstances where God is sending us as a church. And not just trying to get people to come here. But something very important about that is us when we do come here. What do? Well, right now we sing some songs, I preach a sermon, we gather some information, sometimes if it's worth listening to. Other than that, we go back and then we return. But I want us to really see the benefits of what this actually is and focus on the main thing that God gave us to see Him and to experience Him. And those are the sacraments or the ordinances. Most Baptists will call them ordinances, but I like the word sacraments because it gives it a divine feeling, because it is from the divine. This isn't something we came up with. We didn't come up with communion or the Lord's Supper. Hey, I was thinking about some ideas to get us to kind of remember Jesus. What do you think? Man, I don't know. How about a giant fish tank? I mean, He was a fisher of men and all that stuff, and this big fish tank would be awesome, and we could get some of those cool Nemo fish. Everybody loves Dory. We could get some of those. The kids would like it. No, that's not the picture. How about this? How about we get a big cross and we put Jesus on it? That would remind us of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. No, it wouldn't. It would remind us of Jesus' death. Well, how about an empty cross? Yes, that definitely reminds us of the cross, but that is not what God instituted for us to remember who He is and what He's like. Not even the cross. As central as that is to our faith and the picture that it holds, that's not what God gave us. Some people believe that the cross looked like this in a lot of ways. Some people believe it was 3.5 inches above the top post. Some people believe it was 6 inches above the top post. And if you have it wrong, you have the wrong cross and it won't work. That's not the point. The pictures that God has given us are the Lord's Supper and baptism. Those two things. And I believe that should be the church's focus when we get together, is those are the reminders to us of the gospel. So the first one, being the Lord's Supper, I'm going to give you a couple tidbits about that. The Lord's Supper is often referred to as this idea of an ordinance or a supper. Ordinance is a little formal, but it is. It's a big deal. It's formal. It's not something I just suggest you go and do at home, Break out some Welch's and an old cracker you found under the refrigerator that's good and stale, because they are pretty bad, if you think about it. Unleavened bread is not the tastiest of things. I've never been to an Italian restaurant and they pull out that plate and they slowly pour that olive oil on, right? You know where I'm going with this. And then a bunch of that Parmesan cheese. Would you like cracked pepper? Oh, yes, I would. Thank you very much. And here's some unleavened bread to sop that up with. What? Yes, here's some broken crackers. What'd you say? Waiter, this man's lost his mind. Where's my big fluffy bread filled with yeast that will make my heart hurt in about 2 minutes, but I love it. Give it to me. Where is it, right? God instituted this picture of the Lord's Supper so that we could see the beauty and the damage. The damage and the reason for the damage. The results of the damage and the fulfillment of all the promises that God has made to us. Now, sacrament points to this idea that it's sacred, it's special. And we know this because the Apostle Paul writes that some of you, the church in Corinth, some of them were coming and treating it like a feast. They were having other foods and things of that nature, which was fine. It was a time of fellowship and being together. But then when it came time for the special part, for the Lord's Supper, it was more of a, just something you do. It was just all part of it. And Paul says that some of you are coming to the Lord's Supper with sin in your heart, like things that you know are wrong in your life, things that you know are wrong and you're choosing to keep there. I'm not talking about things you're unaware of. All of us have things in our life that we're not even aware of, right? Have you ever looked back at your life 10 years ago and went, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Anybody ever done that? I've done it. I think every day I do that. Just a 10-year reunion. You were a moron 10 years ago. I could repeat over and over. You were a moron. Thank you, Facebook, for sending me those reminders. Moron parade. Thank you, right? But what we have here is this picture of everything that's been accomplished on this moron's behalf. It's this memorial, but it's so much more than that. It holds grace. So when someone comes to this with sin in their heart, this choosing to hold in, no, I'm not going to change. No, I'm not going to move. No, I'm staying stubborn. No, you know what? I don't care what God thinks. And you come to that, the Apostle Paul says, now listen to this. This is crazy. This is crazy. He says, some of you are sick, and some of you have even died because of it. Not because they've choked on the dry crackers, but because they have come and approached this sacred, divine institution with a hardness of heart, and God has judged them for it. Now, you think, ooh, I'm not sure I want to do that. Yes, you do. But here's how you do it. You approach it with gladness and thankfulness that God has given me a picture greater than an aquarium, greater than wooden beams, that I get to experience His death, burial, and resurrection on my behalf, so that I'm reminded of the gospel and the good news in a practical way of something that I can do, something that I can be a part of. And because He understands where we started out, because He understands how we think, how we work, how we develop, how we grow, He has given us these things to continue that growth. We've come up with 1,000 ideas better than this one. Just go to your local Christian bookstore, and they'll teach you how to become a better Christian. I think God knows best. I think God knows better than me. I know God knows better than me. I think God knows more than every Christian author that's ever been born, that will ever be born, about how to get us closer to God and how to get us to better understand grace than His idea. I can't think of a better way to do it. Jesus, on the night in which He took bread, before He died, the last thing He did was He brought His men in together and He said, listen, this is what I want you to do. When you take this cup and when you take this, I want you to remember my broken body that was broken for you, and I want you to take my blood which has been poured out for you. That's what I want you to think about every time you do this. And at that moment they were like, okay, that's weird. But just within hours, they were going to get to see that happen in person. And from that moment on, every time every one of them picked up a piece of that bread for that purpose, I guarantee you cold chills went down their spine. And every time they partook of that cup and they drank, they thought, my gosh, if I'd have only known. If I'd have only known what He was actually doing. If I'd have only known, I could have appreciated what He said at that moment. And I could have said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that you have to do this on my behalf. And Jesus was like, no, that's why you didn't know. My purpose is not for you to feel sorry. My purpose is not for you to feel bad. My purpose is for you to understand how deep my love runs for you. That I was willing to go to a Roman cross so that you could have joy in your heart. Well, after that supper, we know that all the disciples scattered because they were fear of their own lives. And here we have Jesus alone. And Jesus says, I want you to remember it. I want you to remember what I went through for your sake. That's why we have the Lord's Supper. That's why it's divine. That's why it's sacred, because it reminds us of that. It's not 5 ways to be a better businessman. It's not 10 steps to make your family awesome. I mean, that's a bestseller. It's working in a lot of churches. Having family problems? Come to our church. We'll make your family great. It's impossible. Your family is filled with people with broken hearts. You cannot take that and make that great. Only God can do that. And God has instituted these things that are the greatest way to demonstrate to people how to get there. And that's to put Jesus on display in the truth of who He is, and not some self-help guide wrapped up in the Bible. The next thing that God has given us is baptism. And right before we have baptism, we're going to have the Lord's Supper. But baptism, what is the picture of baptism? It's pretty dark in the beginning, right? Has anyone ever been held underwater? Anybody against their will? Just a little while. I'm not talking about like 10 minutes. Let's see if you can make the Navy SEALs type thing. I mean, just like where you felt like you were a little out of control in water. Anybody ever experienced that before? It is not fun. We took a bunch of teenagers on a Christian retreat and went whitewater rafting over in eastern Kentucky. And no, there were no banjos, okay? So just keep that to yourself. So here we are whitewater rafting, and they brought us to a point with these trained supervisors, and the women had unshaved armpits, so I trusted them. But I did everything they said. Because the thought of one of them having to bring me out of the water was so scary. Yes, ma'am, whatever you say, I'll do it. Well, at one point, they brought us to the end where this small bit of rapids, but their purpose was to flip our boat so that we could experience whitewater rafting. They wanted us to appreciate the power behind this water so that you didn't come out here with just in your canoe and no life jacket, so we could experience how powerful this water was. And we came through. Of course, they told us what they were doing, but we didn't really know what they were doing. They're like, yeah, you're going to go through this. The boat's going to capsize. You know, you're going to be in the water and you'll come out. You'll be fine. We'll be here to help you. So I'm like, okay, let's do this. So I took 3 or 4 of the guys with me, and we went over, okay? The nose of the boat went over. It flips, completely flips. And these are giant rafts. These aren't like these little things, you see in Walmart. These are huge. So we go flying and we hit the water, and I'm in the front, so I kind of go over and straight down. Well, the water is going like this in that rapid. So I'm in that, and you have no direction. Like I can see light, so I know that that's the direction I want to go, right? And I see darkness, and I'm thinking, that's not the direction I want to go. I want to go there, but I can't go there, right? And I've got a life jacket on that would float an elephant, and I'm underwater for at least 3 to 4 hours, at least. That's what it felt like. It was horrible. And I came out of the water, and I'm like, waiting for them to send a chopper, because that wasn't supposed to happen. I was terrified. I was terrified. My eyes were as big as saucers, and the guy reaches down, takes my hand, and says, "Good job," and pulls me out like that, and I'm like, "Good job, I almost died." And I went over to one of the, and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, this is horrible. I can't believe they do this to people. I'm going to get on Yelp, and I'm going to give them 1 star. This is terrible." And I go talk to this guy, and I'm like, "Hey, man, how long was I under?" He goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "When I was under, man, how long was I down there?" He said, "I don't know. You couldn't even count. A second and a half? You went like this and went like that. That's about all that happened." But when I went like this, for those 3 hours, right? When I went like that, I lost my ability to feel and see the way the world works. And it was an eternity. It scared me to death. It was like I'm not in control, and it frightened me to my core for a split second. And I came out of that water really believing that everyone was going to be standing there going, "Are you okay?" Nobody even noticed. There were people probably 10 times under longer than I was, but I thought I was dying. You may think, why'd you have this big dramatic elaborate story about this? Water in the Bible is a picture of death. Water to us is a selfie with your toes in it, right? That's when we think about water. You post something on Facebook or you share a photo with your friends. You're sitting in a cool chair with this beautiful scene behind you, right? You're on the beach and you take a picture of your toes like living the dream, right? That's how we think of water. It's beautiful. The biblical picture of water is death. Always. Until Jesus comes around and calls himself the water that is going to save us, that Jesus is the living water. Before that, it's death water. Because when you go underwater, you don't breathe. It is not okay. People don't live underwater. And I said the picture of baptism is scary in the beginning. Because when we take Austin under this water, it's not, "Hey, yippee, fun. We thought of this cool idea that we just splash some water everywhere and make people remember this cool thing. Oh, they do this thing with water at church." This is God's idea. And it's this picture, this true picture of grace that we get to experience because of Jesus. And it's real simple. We're buried with Christ. Buried, literally buried with Christ. That's what the water symbolizes. And just like him, we are raised. And we are raised to walk in newness of life. It's a picture of what Jesus did for us in reality. We get to experience in a kiddie pool. That's what his grace is. We think we're going through hard times. We think we're dealing with things. And it's real. Don't get me wrong. It's real. You are struggling. There are things that are hard and difficult. They are. But let me tell you something. Jesus Christ more than understands every circumstance you've ever had, you've ever been with. Loneliness to the extreme. Fear, more than you could ever understand. The things that should have, could have taken his life and frightened him, but they didn't. He stood in the face of everything he did, even to the point of death on the cross, for this reason. You. So that we could baptize Austin today. And to say, Austin, you've been recognized as one of God's children. You have trusted in Jesus Christ by faith that his death, burial, and resurrection was for you. And now this is your day to tell the whole world that you agree with God and you're a part of his family forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. My whole thing is with baptism and the Lord's Supper is, I think we should do it every day. I mean, it's perfect. It's a perfect reminder because our lives are filled with experiences. We want to experience this, and we want to experience that. I want you to cherish what we do here today. As I invite Brian up, as we prepare for the Lord's Supper, and right after that, as we have the baptism, I want you to cherish this beautiful picture of the gospel.